Hey guys, welcome to another Android simple application development tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to be talking about how to open up the camera app with a button, take an image, capture the image, and then move the image into our app through an image view. So what I've done right here is create a simple app. It's just labeled Camera App 8, and I'm going to start editing my layout file. So I'm going to open up Activity. And the first thing I want to do is change this to linear layout in both tags. This will allow me to add in buttons and text views and things just one below the other. It's a really simple layout format and it doesn't deal with a lot of pixel-based values. So for prototyping and that sort of thing, it's really quick and easy. The next thing I'm going to do is change my orientation to vertical. So here you can see Android orientation, vertical. And I'm actually going to end up doing that in my manifest file as well, but we'll get to that in a second. The next thing I'm going to do is change this to fill parent so that it takes up the max width and the main element takes up the max height. I'm also going to change my width of my button or my text view to be fill parent as well, and I'll leave that text string to hello world. Next thing I'm going to do is create a button, and we're going to give it an ID of button camera, and we're going to give it some text of button camera as well. These text strings and ID strings don't necessarily have to be the same name. I just try to keep everything the same. It makes it easier to quickly tell what's going on in your code. So the same layout options. And I'm also going to create an image view. We're not going to fill it with anything yet, but we do need to access it through an ID. So I'm just going to call this image camera, and you're required to put in a content description. So I'm just going to pass in a string here, and we'll fill that string up in a second, but I'm just going to say content description camera, and then the same layout as all the other elements on the page. So this should be my layout file, and you can see it, Android is already starting to complain about a couple things. One, I didn't fill in the button string, and I didn't fill in the content description string, so we're going to do that now. You can see I've set my hello world string. I'm just going to change that to camera app 8. I'm going to add another string, and I'm going to say button camera, and add one more string, image content description camera, and this is a generic content description. Okay, so those errors should go away, and I've successfully set up my layout. The next thing that I want to do is start messing with the actual behavior. So what I want to do here is go into my main activity.java file, and I want to do a couple things to set this up. First of all, I always want to create a log tag so that I can log any errors and easily recognize what errors are coming from where. So I'm going to create a private static string. I'm going to call it log tag, and it's just going to be labeled camera app 8. that'll tell me these logs. Then I'm going to also create a integer private static int, and I'm going to label that take picture for now, and I'm going to set that equal to 1. We'll get to why I'm doing that in a second. And then I'm going to make a private URI, and we're going to call this, let's just call it image URI. Okay, so first thing I want to do here is import. So you can see here, Android is already complaining that I haven't imported the URI library. So if there's a really cool shortcut here. If you do Command-Shift on the Mac O, it should automatically import the libraries that it detects it's missing. Command-Shift-O on the Mac or Control-Shift-O on the PC. So the next thing I want to do is set up my button. So I'm going to pull in button, and we're just going to do button find view by ID. The nice thing in Android is if you have anything in the view with an ID, it will index that view file and automatically give you the option to find those. So I'm also going to set up an on-click listener. You can see Android suggests the set on-click listener, and we're going to pass in a click listener for this camera button. So I haven't made this function yet, but I know what I'm going to call it. So I'm just going to say camera listener, and then I'm going to go down here and actually create that function. You can see Android is complaining because it doesn't see the function yet, so let's create it. It's an on-click listener, so we labeled it camera listener. And it doesn't take any arguments yet, but it does have a public function. Whoops. And it takes in a view. And the only thing we're going to do in this click listener, when a user clicks on the button, we're going to open up the camera, but we actually want to run this in another function. So for now, we're going to create a function called take photo, and it's going to take in the view information. So we're just going to pass that view straight in there. And again, you can see Android's complaining, so we're going to import the correct libraries. So you can see here, it doesn't know what take photo is, so let's start creating that. And again, that's going to take in a view element, and we're going to do some things here once the user clicks on the button. So the first thing we're going to do is create an intent. So in Android, it's slightly different than iOS development. In Android, they call this an intent, and basically what an intent does is tell the phone we plan to use another app to take our photo. So in this case, what we could do is write a driver to run the camera and take the photo ourselves, or we can call an intent and tell Android we plan on using the native camera app to take the photo and actually to store the photo as well. And then we'll pull the photo in later because we'll have the photo URI. So basically what we're doing is letting Android do all the work. So we'll create a new intent, and we're going to pass in a string for the intent we intend to use, and that's going to be android.media.action. And all caps image capture. This tells Android we're going to use the image capture function. So the next thing we want to do is be able to store this. So we're going to create a new file, and we're going to get the environment. So in the newer Android development environment, you can actually pull something in called get external public directory, get external storage public directory, and then we can actually pass in from the environment variable the pictures directory. Now that's not the only thing we need to pass in. We also need to create a file name. In this case, since it's so simple, I'm just going to call it picture.jpg, but you could end up calling this file anything that you wanted. A lot of people will include some sort of naming convention here that includes the date, some way to make your picture unique so that as you take pictures throughout the day, you're not overwriting any of your old pictures. For instance, if I was to take 2 photos with this app as it's coded right now, it would just simply overwrite picture.jpg every time I took the photo. So in most use cases, that's not really a good idea. But for us, it's fine for right now. And you can see Android's complaining again that I don't have the intent and the file libraries. So we're just going to go ahead and import those, and you can see those errors go away. So the next thing we're going to do is up here we've set an image URI, and we've already instantiated that variable. What we need to do now is set it. So image URI is equal to, and then we're going to get URI from file, and we're just going to pass in the new file we created, and that gives us the URI. Now the next thing we want to do is tell the intent where to put the file that's captured. So in this case we're using the camera, we're going to take a photo, the file is going to get stored someplace, and it's going to give us back some extra output. What we're interested in doing is passing that extra output to the file that we designate so that we know where we're storing the file, and that image can be recalled later on. So what we're going to do is use the intent to put the extra someplace, and then we'll call it back later. So I'm going to use intent.putExtra, and I'm actually going to call something here called media store dot extra output, and you can see it pops up as an Android option, and then we're just going to put in the image URI here. So that's going to allow us to store the camera output wherever we designate the file. And last thing we want to do in Take Photos is actually start the activity for result function, and what that's going to do is code up an activity, and I'll explain what that is in a second. So here we go, start activity for result, and we're going to pass in the intent, and then we're going to pass in this keyword that we designated up here, take picture equal to 1. Now what that's saying to Android is we're going to pass in a number 1 to this start activity for result. Now what this number 1 represents is a request code. The request code, when it pertains to the camera, is simply saying we want to use the main camera or the rear facing camera on your phone. So when we pass a different number in there, we're designating the different devices that we want to use, and those are the request codes. So the next thing we want to do is override. You can see we've started the activity for result, so we're going to store this file someplace and we're going to do something with it, but we haven't designated any sort of function to take action once we receive the file. So right now the user would be able to start up their camera, but we wouldn't be able to do anything with the output. So what we need to do is override the event listener for the camera output, and that's simply called activity result. So I'm going to go down here, I'm going to grab the override, and I'm going to designate a protected void, and the name of this function is on activity result, and it's going to be a request code that it gives us, a result code, and the intent. Okay, so now the first thing we want to do, since we're overriding this function, is call the main function. And you can see Android even pre-populates some of these variables in the function. So in this case, I renamed it intent instead of data. So I'm just going to have to pass in intent here. Okay, so now that we have the override, we want to start checking for some things. The first thing we want to do is make sure the user hit the OK button. So we want to say if result code is equal to, and then we have a global here that we can call for this. It's called activity, and then this should give us some options in here, and we say result OK. That means the user thinks it's okay to use that image. So inside of this, we want to do a couple things. First of all, we want to designate a selected URI for the image. So we're going to define a URI, selected URI. Or actually, let's name this selected image. And we're just going to set that equal to the image URI that we designated up top. Then we're going to basically, there's something in Android called Get Content Resolver, which notifies other applications of your content. And if, let's say, you change the image or write to the image, or you're not done writing to the image, this Get Content Resolver will notify the other applications and sort of keep everybody on the same page. So what we want to do is set that up. So it's a really easy call. We're just going to say Get Content Resolver, and we're just going to do notify change, and we're going to pass in the selected image and the observer. We don't really need to set up an observer function for that, so we're just going to pass in null. The next thing that we want to do is set up some variables to use when we're trying to pull back the image from the URI that we designated. So I'm going to pull in the image view. It's just simply image view. I'm going to name it image view, and it's going to be an image view. And we're going to do the same thing that we did to find the button. It's find view by ID, and we're just going to select from the variable r.id. And you can see there's my image camera. So I'm going to select that from the view, and now I'm going to designate the content resolver and a bitmap to hold the image data. So content resolver, we're just going to name it CR, and it's just going to be get content resolver. And then we're going to designate a bitmap. Okay, so now that we've designated some variables, we probably need to import some libraries. We'll do that now. You can say all those errors go away. So now we're going to actually try this. It's always a good idea when you're trying to write data or store data or manipulate data in any way. It's a good idea to start out with a try block and then catch any errors on any exceptions that follow. So rather than trying to confirm whether we wrote or were able to get bitmap data, let's just try to get the bitmap data first and catch any exceptions along the way. So we do that by starting what's known as a try operator, and then we're going to introduce a catch, and we're going to define exceptions here. And for now, we're just going to log that out You can see I can select my log tag here, and my message is actually going to be the error. So what are we going to try? First things first, we're going to try to get the bitmap data. So bitmap equals, and here we're going to go back into media store. This is kind of our global, and let's see here, we can see images. We can select images dot media, and then if we go one more time, we can see get bitmap. So all it needs is a content resolver and a URI. Perfect. We have both of those things. It even passes in content resolver, and for the URI, it's just the selected image we designated above. You can see Android's already suggesting this, so we'll go ahead and use it. And the next thing that we want to do is set the image. So we just simply do that by saying image view dot set image, and Android should suggest some things. Since we have some bitmap data, we'll do set image bitmap, and we'll pass in the bitmap variable. Okay, and the last thing we want to do is just notify the user that this was all successful. And we'll pass in the context main activity.this. You can see up here I got main activity from this class that I'm working within. That's the context that I'm passing into this toast.makeText. If you're not familiar, Toast is just a way to notify users. It's a little pop-up at the bottom of the screen. You can pass errors along to the user or notify them of certain events. So in this case, we're just going to pass in the file name. So we'll say selected image dot toString, and that'll pass in the URI, and then the duration. Toast gives us an option. Let's make it length long, and the last thing we want to do is show to the user. So I've saved all of this out. I don't think I can show you any more than the front part of the app because I'm working on my computer and I won't be able to show you. The Android simulator does not allow you to use the camera. You have to use an actual device. So I wouldn't be able to show you guys the whole app operational. But let's see if we can't. Yeah, we won't be able to show anything more than that. So if you followed my first tutorial, I showed you how to make an app with some buttons. Basically, what this app is going to look like is something like that. Camera 8 app with a title, a button. Once you click on this button, you'll be taken to your camera app where you'll take a photo, you'll hit a check mark, and then what should be returned in this app is down here, this invisible image view should fill with the image data of the image that you captured. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section, and I'm going to take some screenshots and make a blog post out of this. Thanks for stopping by.